morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Santa Clara County's CADRE Wildfire Tabletop exercise. I'm Marcia Hovey, the Executive Director of CADRE. For those of you that were with us last time, welcome back. For those of you that are new, welcome, glad you're here. This is day 2, so we have different topics, so we do expect a little bit of a different audience. For those of you on the call right now, if you could please, in the window with your picture in it, change your name, put your first name and your organization name, and then in the chat, type your name and your organization as well. We are running Otter AI, the artificial intelligence transcription software today, so you can access that at the top of the screen. At the bottom of the screen, we're also running Zoom transcription, and you can click on that to enable that to be able to see it. If you need any assistance with those 2 accessible services, Molly McLeod is our accessibility person today, and you can private message her and she'll help you get access to those things. And let's go past that. Today, the exercise objectives are to clarify the roles and responsibilities of government and everyone else that's involved in wildfire, explore the planning gaps and how organizations can work together to fill them, and to inform participants about existing resources and processes. And the assumptions, this is not new to the people that were here on the call last time, but for the benefit of the new attendees, all ideas are welcome. The exercise scenario is based on existing processes and best practices. Disasters are overwhelming for everyone involved. We're all in this together. We don't have all the answers, but we know they exist in this group of people, and we are all here to learn. So we're keeping the questions at a high level so that the information is relevant, that everyone can apply it to their certain situation. Our hope is that this exercise will be the first in a series of discussions that will get into the weeds, if you will, on these different planning issues, and that by this time next year, instead of doing a tabletop exercise, we'll be reporting on all of the new plans and processes that are in place that we've all agreed to. All right, this is day 2, so that's this part of the screen that is not grayed out, and I'll be right up front. There was so much information to do with temporary evacuation points and shelters that we will not get into local assistance centers today. That's going to get pushed to the next. This is like the never-ending story, but this will get pushed to the next exercise that will be in October. So if you came just specifically to hear about local assistance centers, you can hang up and come back next month. But I'll tell you that the sheltering ties right into it. So I do think you're going to find some value. All right. So today we're doing temporary evacuation points and shelters. We'll have scenarios. I'll be presenting information on what exists and what current roles and responsibilities are. We'll have some chat. We're not going to do breakout rooms today. We will have a poll and a survey at the end and some discussion. And we're going to use the whiteboard instead of the Jamboard this time. The whiteboard's a little bit easier to navigate, and I think it will help us a little bit more to all be able to share information. I do realize that the folks that are using screen readers today are going to have a challenge because we're using the chat and live transcription. We still don't have a solution for that, but if you folks want to not look at the chat, we'll read out some of the the chat messages that we're going to work on during the day, and then we'll download the chat. You should be able to download it yourself, but if you can't from your chat window, then we can send you a full transcript of that for later viewing. So this exercise is, let me pop over here for a second. So the exercise is going to take you through the shelter activities for the day, and it's not specific to any jurisdiction. So it's designed so that you can imagine that this wildfire is occurring in your city or your organization have been requested to help because the local jurisdiction is overwhelmed. And that could happen for any number of reasons. One, because they're a small jurisdiction and they just don't have enough people to do everything that's required. And also they may be evacuating, so they need a little bit of help getting shelters and temporary evacuation points up and running. And even though this is a wildfire scenario, the planning concepts, the sheltering concepts apply to any disaster. We are recording this. It will be posted on the website. The recording from last week is on the website right now on the preparedness page of the CADRE website under webinars. All right. So previously on day one, I feel like a soap opera now. We talked about the information that should be shared by government and other organizations serving clients, students, staff, and congregations who might need to start paying attention when a fire starts, identifying trusted sources of emergency information, the importance of not relying on Google Translate when publicizing information. Then we moved into evacuation warnings. And for those that weren't on the call last week, evacuation warning means that you're getting ready to evacuate. And you can assume that you have an hour at the minimum. It could be longer than that, but you should be ready to leave in an hour. And then evacuation order means leave right now. We talked about notifying key stakeholders, anyone who would want to assist who might need more time to evacuate. Because we do tell anyone that needs more time to evacuate to leave on the evacuation warning. Talked about notifying those key stakeholders, the number of languages in our county and how we might be able to start translating more of them in real time. Discussed our alert system and whether we needed to use it differently because of the ability of some phones to only receive 90 characters instead of 360. And then the need to design effective messages that have information necessary that causes an individual to act immediately and not start searching for more information or to try to make sense of it. And most importantly, that your temporary evacuation point and a phone number for people to call if they don't have transportation to evacuate have to be in place when the evacuation warning goes out. So now here we are on at the next phase, which is 3:30, the fire department issues that evacuation order. You estimate that the order covers 1,500 houses, an assisted living center, a horse stable, a preschool and a middle school, a church, a nonprofit food pantry, and a private veterinary hospital. Every street out of the area is bumper to bumper traffic. Law enforcement helicopters are overhead announcing the evacuation. So our first activity, we're going to talk about caring for people. We're moving now into the phase of the disaster where instead of working in our own building, coordinating with our own staff and making phone calls, that we're now going to start working with the public in person, up close and personal. So let's watch this quick video that shows a family evacuating. And I need to share this screen. Let me stop share. Now let me find the screen. And it was preloaded, so why is it buffering? I just love technology. Give me one more second. Okay. Sorry, lots of screens to keep moving around here.
This is Molly. Marcia, could you please provide an audio description of the video so that those who are
Absolutely.
or not able to see could participate? Thanks.
Thank you, Molly. So this is Marcia, and that video showed the front of a house. It's from their ring camera that's on their front door, and it's showing their SUV and a woman and 2 children loading things into their van, including a suitcase, a doll, the family dog, and someone running down the street saying, "You got to get out now, there's a fire." Oops, it's going to try to come up again. Hold on. Close that. All right, can you see the what if screen? Are we good?
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
All right, so all together now. What if you are the ones evacuating? What if that was you in your house? What's running through your mind right now? And you can either type in the chat or you can just start shouting things out, because I'm sure a lot of things are running through people's minds right now.
Keeping my family safe.
Keeping the family safe.
Fight or flight.
Okay, that fight or flight. So your brain has gone down to its most primitive element of, do I stay or do I go?
We don't think, our mind is not set up to think during an emergency.
That's right.
Making sure I have my battery charger.
Oh yeah, battery power backup is really important.
Marcia, somebody in chat said grab the cats, which in itself is a task.
Herding cats, yeah, that's a great thing to do. So so even that might even be like when the fire starts, you find the kitties and put them into a carrier before it gets chaotic.
And before there's a disaster, make sure that they can get into a carrier easily, because that in itself is, you know, a training issue.
Yep, that's another whole training issue. What else? I'm sure you've got stuff going through your mind. I mean, what about all your stuff?
Important documentation for the kitty.
Have your important documentation. I heard somebody else said, was that Molly again? No,
It's Christine.
Christine.
Making sure that
This is Liz.
making sure you have food for the kitty.
This is Liz. If you had attended a pillowcase project or a pillowcase session from Red Cross, the child would have known to get their pillowcase, put their emergency supplies that they need, and get them into the car.
So that's a great resource going forward. Thanks, Liz. How about if you're in your house and you don't have a ride? What's going through your mind right now?
You're in
Maybe
deep
you're
trouble.
maybe you're kids that were home alone and your mom's at work.
Should have had this is Liz, you should have had a practice or rehearsal beforehand to know what to do.
Mhm.
We talk about that as a
This-
class.
This is
Yeah,
Christine.
go
If
ahead,
you're-
Christine.
If you're a paratransit writer, if you're a paratransit writer, you find out from them way ahead of time what can be done to assist you in that emergency situation, and if they can, who can help you. Some of us use power chairs, and every power chair that I've ever seen recently does not fold.
Thank you. And this is Marcia. And I think one of the really critical things for anyone that might not have a ride, or, you know, their ride isn't always at the house with them, is to talk to your neighbors, because that neighborhood plan is the first key to a successful evacuation, is everybody knows what everyone else's needs are and can support each other. All right, let's go to the second question, which is government or schools or colleges, because you have that ability to evacuate or to order evacuations too. What can you tell this family that will help them as they evacuate? Because this is when the constant flow of information from you needs to start, so they don't go looking other places for information. You
This
can
is Christine.
voice it. Christine, go ahead.
This is Christine. So I would, way beforehand, of course, talk to my young adult and make certain that he or she has a plan of action to not only get out of the dorm if the dorm itself is on fire, etc., but certainly if they're away for college, that a plan of action is set up to where they can easily get a hold of you, or relatively easily get a hold of you, to relieve any kind of anxiety they might have for your safety.
Thank you, Christine. I see someone in the chat said the locations of the temporary shelters. Yes, so when the order came out, you would repeat the locations of those temporary shelters. You can check the city social media. That's good. So how fast can you get information out? And you want to practice that and get it as fast as you possibly can, because you know, they're driving now, so they're way outside their comfort zone and they don't know what to do next. They're in a blur. So any direction, not really long detailed emails or text, but short little blurbs so that they could read a little bit and then continue on. Any other thoughts about that?
This is Molly. I wanted to note that Tony had his hand raised earlier. I just raised mine because I wanted to say, so far, conversation is focusing on that family, which makes sense because that's the visuals, but the description also included that there's a care facility that's in there. And not everybody will have go bags. In fact, I'm pretty sure that not everybody has go bags even on this call. And so the conversations about how to get out, focusing on private transportation. What about public transportation? And I want to re-echo what Christine Fitzgerald said from Silicon Valley Independent Living Center, which is paratransit, which is why we also need to know, are they going to be extending the paratransit hours? Sometimes, like Hurricane Irma, the length of time there wasn't a lot of time beforehand, but regular hours just aren't going to cut it. In an earthquake, you don't have advance notice. So what are the specific plans that jurisdictions will have for knowing how many wheelchair accessible vehicles, because in a neighborhood, my neighbors in a car may not have a lift van. In fact, they probably don't. So those are some of the things where if you're thinking about some of the more complex cases, it actually can give keys to the easier situations that will be found in an emergency. And then Tony, I didn't know if you wanted to talk since you'd raised your hand as well.
Yeah, I was only going to make the comment about go bags, and I think you need one go bag that keeps you going for 24 hours, but you also, I think, need a go bag of valuable documents, preferably some backup drives and so on, anything that you really can't afford to lose. So those two things go hand in hand, as well as just, if it's at night, have a bag of clothes ready with shoes that you can just grab, run on your pajamas, and then put on, if you have to, if you only have a few minutes to escape. And in our evacuation plan, we've got separate things to grab. You get 5 minutes time to grab, so 5 minutes warning, 1 hour's warning, a day's warning. It's very different things you can do.
This is Marcia. That's amazing. And maybe you want to share your list with us.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Yeah, I can. If take a few minutes to dig it out, then I can let me know when is a good time.
Okay. Molly had also mentioned that I did note in the evacuation that there were a lot of different types of facilities getting evacuated. I thought that might prompt the government to start to think, oh no, a horse stable. Now, ideally, go ahead, Christine.
I'm sorry.
For horse stables, the Santa Clara County Large Animal Evacuation Team will have been put into action. And when its members are notified after evacuating their own horses, and we have a central location, the Santa Clara County Horsemen's Association stable on way out in the Almaden Valley. That's a place to which we can take animals. We make an effort to educate barn owners and people who stable their horses at various barns to fill out forms indicating who owns the horse, a picture with the horse and the owner together, so that when it comes time to pick up a horse, they have a photograph showing them with their horse, with information also as to who the vets are, who their alternate contact folks are. And we've all gone through training for this. We don't get into the area of the fire itself. We're restricted so that we're to act in advance of the fire and keep ourselves safe. But we do have, the county does have a procedure for evacuating horses, a location to which they can be evacuated, teams trained to do it. And we have connections with surrounding counties, which also have large animal evacuation teams and can give assistance if needed.
Thank you. That's good information. The reason that I put all of the different organizations on the evacuation scenario is that I want each of those types of organizations to remember that they have to have a plan, that the plan is not to call for help. The plan is, you know who to call to take care of you and to take care of the people that you're with. Liz, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Yes, I did. In our county, there are more large animals than just horses. We have piggies, we have sheep, we have goats. And we ran into a problem a number of years ago at Red Cross when we had to help evacuate them. It's interesting that the owners of these animals do not like the boy pigs to mix with the girl pigs and the boy goats with the girl goats. because as a nurse, I can tell you they populate and repopulate.
Thank you, Liz. And animals is a whole nother issue. We're not even touching it in this training. We will have another meeting to talk about that. And I'm hoping at that meeting, we have some nonprofits that work with animals so that they can help with their expertise create this plan. And I need to move on in a second, but let me.
This is Cindy. William, you make my heart sing when you tell us all that information about the horses. Someone on the call has their hand raised and their phone number. I don't know who it is.
8007.
It's probably me, Christine. Yeah, it's Christine. I wasn't able to get the Zoom to go. So another thing that I would definitely want to, two things I would want to make sure. If the paratransit has not already done so, that there is a plan of action and to not only assist those who are already a part of their system, but of course those that are not. It's one thing to say we're going to come to your rescue, Santa Clara County, here at San Mateo County, but it's another thing entirely to have that preordained process set up to make sure that not only the people that our paratransit serve, also is set up to help with those that need assistance and are not a part of that system.
Yeah.
A good example is the nursing homes.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. This is Marcia, and we do have, and I know Christine, you're one of the leaders of it. We have an access and functional needs group. This would be a great discussion for them to have, and VTA is part of that group too. So we'll work farther on that. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to move on. Can you type in the chat, and we'll get to it if we can. Because I've got to move on to the next piece in order to keep us out at 11 o'clock. So Cindy and Kelly, Cindy, you're on mute. If you see anything else in the chat that you think we need to address right now, let me know.
Yeah, okay.
But moving on, so now we have, if we had 1,500 houses and we assume 2.5 people per house as a guess, we have 3,750 people, 3,750 people now moving toward, and their pets, moving toward your temporary evacuation point. And I think we can all agree that the preparation and practice are keys to a successful emergency response. Because COVID is a slow-moving event, we've all had time to slowly figure out the emergency and make things work. You cannot wing an evacuation. So before we start talking about mobilizing our teams, let's watch an example of the benefits of practicing and preparing when seconds count.
Okay, come on everyone, we're behind schedule. You know what's gotta be done. Move it, move it, move it. Hey, you there, pick up the pace. You're falling behind. Come on, let's go. Everyone, pull together. We've got the rescue on our hands. You there. Here we go.
Yay. Now, if you notified your team to initiate a community evacuation or a building evacuation for that matter, how long would it take them to act? If these ants had to stop and discuss what they were going to do and who was going to do what, they would all be dead right now.
This is Molly. I'm going to provide an access description. So this is a really cute video of an anteater. At first you see the ants, there's a leader, he's getting them lined up. The ant, not he, is leading them along the way. And then all of a sudden, there's the sucking of the anteater. The ants are prepared. They all join into feet by feet and connect themselves into a ball, which prevents the anteater from sucking in all of the ants. Hooray for their preparation and survival. Back to you, Marcia.
Thank you so much. That was perfect. So just like the ants, each team member on your team has a different role. Each role has to be accomplished with excellence, and we're caring for people who live in our community, and they're depending on us to be really ready to do this. So even though sometimes you think, oh, it's just so much work to plan. I've got too much on my plate. You have to think about, if you have to initiate, you want to be like the ants. You need to know exactly what each person's going to do and how, and to implement it quickly.
Okay, come on, everyone.
Up, and let's go past the ants. Okay. So we're going to go into the sheltering now. The people are on their way. We're going to start with the temporary evacuation points, but I wanted to give you some basic definitions to show the differences between the types of evacuation shelters. So the temporary evacuation point, it's a waiting area. It's not overnight, although it could operate overnight, but it's not set up with cots or a sleeping area. It's just for people who are waiting to see if the fire is going to pass safely by their houses so that they can go back home. Snacks should be provided. The responsibility to open a TEP is with the jurisdiction, not the Red Cross. So the jurisdiction has to know how to set this up. And the Red Cross can offer some support, and we'll show you what the support is. Then there are congregate care shelters, and these are the traditional overnight shelters that have cots, 3 meals a day, health care and mental health services when they're run by the Red Cross. And the jurisdiction still has to provide support services as the Red Cross needs them. Then non-congregate shelters are the ones that we've been using during COVID. They still could be used now, but it's up to the jurisdiction to decide what the current threat is from COVID. So hotels are paid for by the jurisdiction, but the Red Cross can come in and provide the 3 meals a day and the healthcare and the mental health services if you coordinate that. And then animal shelters, which we're not getting into, but these are only for the client animals. And those are also operated by the jurisdiction, not by the Red Cross. And this is a topic that we will have to talk about on another day. A couple years ago, we did a whole training on animal sheltering, and it's a big deal. So I think that my hope would be that we identify some nonprofit animal organizations that are willing to focus on that, because it's an overwhelming task for government to take it on, and it's easy to get off track with other priorities of jurisdictions, and then it doesn't get done. So any nonprofit, it doesn't have to be just animal care. Anybody that kind of has that love for animals that wants to help us. We have a plan. There are several good plans in Santa Clara County. We just have to expand that out to all the rest of the jurisdictions. And I'm sure they can be improved, because everything can be improved.
Marcia, this is
right.
I just wanted to add, Liz put in the chat to define congregate shelters. It can be more than hotels. It can also be dormitory rooms, schools, colleges, tent, campgrounds, RV parks, etc. So it goes back to the hotel model.
Thank you. That's true. I was only thinking about COVID, but you're right. It's any other space. Great. All right. So remember last week when we shared that the temporary evacuation points have to be established, and you have to have staff en route to set it up, to welcome the people who are evacuating there when the evacuation warning is announced. So it's almost like when the smoke starts, before any of this happens, you've got to start getting your team ramped up and loading cars or whatever it is that you need to take to set up, because there will be people there waiting for you. The purpose is to get people out of harm's way, to allow them to wait there and then sort people. So the Red Cross will come and they will interview the people, ideally actually I'm getting ahead of myself, hold on. The requirements of a TEP, it needs to be a landmark site so that everybody knows where it is. And it's got to be a large parking lot with RV parking, because people, if they're evacuating, they're going to bring campers and RVs besides their cars. Ideally, you have a memorandum of understanding with the facility in advance, because it would be really hard to call them and say, hey, I'm sending 3,700 people to your parking lot. Is that okay?
This is Molly. I need to interrupt for just a moment on an access need. The Zoom transcripts are not working right now, but there is a workaround for anybody who needs or benefits from the transcripts. At the top left corner, there's the opportunity to open the Otter AI. It's automated captions. It will open in a separate screen. So that's available. If you have the chat capability and need help, feel free to send me a message, Access Molly. Thank you so much for the pause for an access need, Marcia.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that that has stopped working. It says it's working.
Yeah, I see there it says it's working.
Let me disable it and start it again and see. Live transcript, enable.
This is Molly, and it is great that we've got redundancy with the Otter AI, which can be done at the top. But yes, now that you've done the reset, the Zoom transcript is continuing. And this is an example of why we have an access person for events, is to try and pay attention to these types of things, because the appropriate practice is to pause and address action needs and then move forward together. So thank you for doing that. And back to you, Marcia.
This is Marcia. Thank you, Molly. You taught me that. Let's see. So parking, and then how many cars are going to show up with 3,700 people?
3,700.
If people have 2 cars at their house, do you think they're going to bring them both? Probably. That's a really hard one to change, because especially if you're in a jurisdiction that has 1-lane roads, you really want people to pack their cars and take the fewest number of cars, because you don't want them bumper to bumper when the flames come over the hill. But that's a really hard one. But just think about that. You got to kind of calculate how many cars. So lots of cars.
Marcia, one of the I just wanted to share a comment that was in the chat box. Another consideration that one of the participants noted was considering if sheltering in place is an appropriate consideration or option due to complexities of evacuating a skilled nursing facility or large animals. So.
I have to scoot over here because I've got one computer blocking another.
So this is Christine, well, Marcia is kind of scooting over. One thing I'd like to suggest is encouraging your community members to practice loading up their car, so they can figure out, number one, how many kids, dogs, people are going to be in that car, plus whatever they're taking. Do they have a roof rack, for example? If they have a roof rack, do they understand how to properly load it up so that nothing is going to fall off? If they don't, do they have enough trunk space to provide enough area to corral what they need? Do they know what critical things that they're going to want to take versus what things they're going to have to jettison? All of these are horrible decisions that people are going to have to make in an emergency, but it's far better to do this planning way ahead of time so that you're mentally prepared along with the list, because again, you're going to be very upset over all of this, to be able to initiate this, but all the more reason to make it happen as soon as you can versus right at the last second.
Thank you, Christine. And this is Marcia again. So to answer Denise's question, yes, sheltering in place is great if the fire's not coming down on you. And so that would be if you're any skilled nursing facility or other assisted living should talk to their local fire department to look at the viability of that. But I think you should always have a plan to get out. And it may be your last resort, but you have to have a plan. So you can work with your fire department and your local emergency managers and CADRE to do that. And Tony, your hand is up. Or maybe that was up from the other time. Okay.
Oh,
so
sorry
we're
about that.
Try.
There you
Okay.
go.
Okay.
Sorry, couldn't unmute fast enough. In an earthquake scenario, some people might use bicycles, temporary shelter, because if roads are blocked, bicycles can be the most efficient way to get somewhere. You're not going to carry a lot of stuff, but we have to think about that possibility as well.
Mm-hmm. Lots of possibilities. And it's really good to think of them ahead of time. Whoops, back up. I gave the answers away. All right, we're going to go into these questions, and I have to change my screen share. We're going to use this new thing called Whiteboard. What's new to me? Okay, so I'm going to share the whiteboard. And at the top of the whiteboard, or at the top of your Zoom screen, you should see the wording, Zoom options or view options. And then you select whiteboard. Is anybody having trouble finding that? And then once you get to whiteboard, then you click annotate, and you will have the ability to grab text or make a text box and type in your answers. And we've been playing on it this morning, and I'm just going to erase that right now. There's Liz is doing squiggles.
Are you going to be doing an equivalent for those of us on the phone and or unable to use
you can
technology?
You can verbalize your answers to the question. So while some are typing and we'll kind of call out what they're talking about, then you can verbalize as well. And we'll try to, maybe I can get Cindy or Kelly to capture what they're saying. One of you want to take that on? Okay, so the question, I'm going to get that cursor away from there. So the question is, what will make your temporary evacuation point a great experience for the evacuees? And then what are some potential temporary evacuation point sites? So where are some large parking lots? So this is when we're talking about what will make it a great experience. It's like when they drive down the street and they see a driveway, what kind of signage do you want? When they're in the parking lot, how do they know where to park? Once they're parked, because we want to keep them in their cars. This is just because it's a temporary area and you don't want to go into the whole shelter setup, so people can be comfortable in their cars for a few hours. And so what are all of the logistics that would need to be in place for a temporary evacuation point with people perhaps sitting in their cars for several hours with their family, with their pets?
This is Christine.
Christine, go ahead.
I would definitely want to make sure that there is enough shade for people to park and feel comfortable in their car. And I would also want to make sure that there are cooling stations, bathrooms, wheelchair accessible bathrooms, and other areas for the animals to take care of things, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
But making it as user-friendly as possible for people to stay in their car.
Great, thank you, Christine. So I'm seeing here on the whiteboard someone standing at the entrance giving instructions, and that could be traffic control too. Having Wi-Fi available would be awesome. Having written instructions, so maybe there is a pre-written document that gives information. Welcome to our temporary evacuation point. You'll only be here for a little while. We're going to have somebody come by and check in on you in the car, and and follow the signs if you need to relieve your pet, or if you need to use the restroom. Covered parking, Christine, since you were talking about that need for cooling and shade, covered parking would be nice, even if it was multi-story. If people had their cars turned off, that wouldn't be a bad place either to have that. And near public transportation, yes, because people will walk up. Or they may come on a bus, and so we do need to have some kind of a tented area, or could be an inside room, depending on COVID, if you want to have a place for those that don't have a car to wait. If you do need to have that.
I'd also like to add one more thing, and that is a designated drop-off point for paratransit.
Designated drop-off for paratransit. Okay, that's a really good one. Thank you. What's a feather flag? Oh, is that like the things that people use for the advertisements? Those kind of tall feather-shaped flags?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Interpreters, absolutely. Snacks for the food, snacks for the kids. So, okay. Ham radio, so having some kind of communication there, depending on how crazy communication is with the phones. I know in past fires that phones get really overwhelmed because the family and friends start calling to see if you evacuated. And so having a redundant capability there would be good. Okay, you can
Power
keep, power outlets, okay. Yeah, you'd need some.
Or the battery charge.
Nice.
The charge.
But if people might need to have to.
I'll take care.
People might have to, charge their phones in their cars. So maybe even having some different adapters. So maybe they did run out without the charger for their car, but maybe we have a few USB chargers for some of the more common phones. And maybe that's reminding people right off the bat to write down any important phone numbers that are in their phone in case their phone dies.
Hey, Charlene. Oh, I'm so glad to talk to you, because Carol Bob Mansberger was trying to get you.
Okay, so let's put Liz on mute. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, Marcia. This is Tom from Los Gatos CERT. I just wanted to share with the group that we have had two neighborhood hillside evacuations in the last 2 years, actually. We just had one this February where we evacuated about 35 households. And of course, this was just a drill and it was set up, but we did have a list of all the households that participated. We brought them down through traffic control at our Calvary Church. It was located, and it is a temporary shelter for Los Gatos Montessorino residents. So we use that. They have a huge parking lot for at least 100 vehicles. And we had 35 households that participated. We controlled the traffic. We greeted them when they entered. We had a reception for them in a tent where we recorded their names and addresses. We also opened up our EOC, so we were able to communicate to the EOC when folks came into the evacuation area. So we actually accounted for 100% of everybody that signed up to participate. So we had radio set up. We had radio communication within the traffic control areas. We had ham radio communication to our EOC. So it really went well. This was our second time. As I mentioned, we did it last year. And now we're going to expand that to another area next February when we plan another one of these neighborhood evacuations. So this was joint between our Los Gatos Police Department, our CERT teams, and our DART teams.
It's great. Thank you.
That's great. Yes, that's really good. Thanks, Tom. Any time that you practice at the neighborhood level, you're going to be better off. All right. This on your screen now, hopefully you can see this is not an inclusive list. I think you actually maybe covered more than this list does. Now I can't remember, going back to the whiteboard, if you mentioned that the restrooms and the hand washing stations and things were accessible. Okay, that's excellent. All right, and then for the information handouts, again, these can be made in advance for the most part, and have a frequently asked questions, what to expect when you're at the TEP, what to do if they choose to make their own arrangements to stay somewhere with family and friends. So as the Red Cross is going through, they're talking to the ones that are going to need shelter, but then those that say, no, we can make arrangements, and they leave, we don't know where they're going now. So it's important to explain to them how to register with us so that we can track where they are and give them information about the fires. Let's see.
This is Molly. One other access addition. Having the
Molly.
accessible bathrooms is not enough. You need to make sure that they're actually positioned in a way that wheelchair users can enter and exit. And so one thing that can be helpful is to have a yardstick or have a length of rope or ribbon, something that is the length that you need, and then doing a double check. At a recent event in downtown San Jose, wheelchair accessible bathrooms were blocked, and also lines to get into the community event did not leave travel space. So having something as simple as a yardstick or some measuring and using that makes a difference. And I know that Christine has her hand up and would be able to speak about this or other access issues quite knowledgeably. Christine?
Thank you, Molly. Another thing that I would strongly recommend, that as you're handing out the physical written materials, that if somebody shows up with a visual impairment or completely blind, that you make arrangements to sit with that person, explaining what is on the sheet in front of them. They can, of course, keep it if they choose to, but this is not as critical as getting that information to them, and also making sure throughout the time that they are there that someone is periodically checking in with them. All too often, people come to these places, get set up, you're there, and nobody is checking back around to you to make sure that you don't need a secondary piece of information, material, whatever. And that
Christine,
goes for
thank you.
anybody with a disability.
Yeah, thank you. That is such an excellent point. And anyone on this call, if you're responsible for implementing the temporary evacuation point, I hope you add that to your checklist of what you're supposed to do. I'm going to add it to mine. All right, now the Red Cross, they're not completely absent. If they are available, they're not tied up doing other sheltering, they can come and assist, but it's still the jurisdiction's TEP, but they can help set up that safe entrance and exit. They do have expertise in, traffic control. So again, talk to them in advance and just get it all documented. So if they're not available, you're still doing it according to people that have practiced it a lot. They can set up that reception area for walk-in clients. If you ask them to, they can provide snacks. They will register clients, including, checking right now for COVID symptoms or other health related needs, so that they can be addressed and supported. And ideally, we're keeping everybody in their cars as much as possible. Red Cross has a client welcome letter. Maybe you want to take a look at that. And then they can help keep the clients informed as well as they're going from car to car. They can share information too. But at some point, all of the staff members, all of the volunteers, I think this is a great role for CERT, could need to have a regular briefing so that they've got the most current information to share with the cars that they're going to. And I'll tell you also that I had a conversation, I'm not sure if he's on the call, but County Social Services last year got a lot of experience setting up temporary evacuation points, because there were, Mount Hamilton fire was a lot of unincorporated area, and that's what Santa Clara County is responsible for, the unincorporated area. And so they set up temporary evacuation points in Cupertino and in, I don't know if they did one in Los Gatos. I know they did one in Morgan Hill. But I spoke with Gil Valverde, and he explained that the county will set them up, and that they're willing to set it up for another jurisdiction as well, but the other jurisdiction would have to help. And so again, that should be discussed in advance so that everybody decides what their roles and responsibilities will be. I did ask him if other organizations could participate in setting up TEPs, and he said the more the merrier. So if that sounds like something that your organization would want to help with, just put it in the chat or answer it in the survey question later. And CADRE will be working with them to help to set up all of these roles and responsibilities. But it's good progress.
Marcia, this is Cindy. Just a quick point, question directly for you. Do you want me to put the evacuation link video into the chat at this point?
You can put the first couple, I think. I didn't give you the ants, did I? It's embedded. No. Yeah, you can share the one from the beginning with the family evacuating, and then I don't remember what's coming next. It's probably the FEMA prep talk.
It is. It's
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So pretty soon. All right. So registration and the intake process.
I'm sorry, Marcia, really quickly, is this information also going to be shared in email, because I can't,
yes.
access the chat?
Yes, I got behind. I am sorry I got behind, so I did not send out the supporting documentation, partly because it was giving away some of the answers, because I will give you a bunch of information and all of these links after today, and we'll just keep building on that as we get more resources, and I'll listen to what has been shared today and add those ideas too, so that you have a more complete list. So yes, it will be emailed out. Okay, so the registration and intake, yes, you're welcome. The registration and intake process, because the Red Cross is only doing registration for people who need shelter, there's a gap, because we do need to account for everyone who evacuates. Once they leave the TEP, and some people will never go to the TEP, they'll just head off to family and friends. We would like them to go to the TEP just because it's our first point of contact as the jurisdiction with them. But once they leave, if you haven't taken down their contact information or where they're going to be, then we don't have any record of them existing. And then if they have property damage and you're trying to get a hold of them, or you want to send them an email to tell them that there's a special meeting of the evacuees, we don't know where they are anymore. So CADRE has purchased a software called Vision Link, where it's not quite live, although we're going to be using it in Santa Cruz County. They're using it for their long-term recovery. But the part that I want you to know about is that it has an online evacuee registration portal. You can give people a QR code and they can fill out from their smartphone. It can be on websites. So anybody associated with the evacuation can immediately put in their name, their address, their current contact information, and we won't lose them, and they'll get better customer service. And that's all I wanted you to know about that. At this point, with the evacuation order in place, CADRE would have up an evacuation page on their website specific for the event. So if you go to the response and relief section of the website, you'll see right now we still have COVID-19 up, fire. The screenshot on the left is the kind of the home page for response and relief, where it's got every current activation, and it's crazy how many we've had this year. But you can click on that and then it will take you to a specific page. You can see the screenshot on the right is the specific page for fire response. Some information is just static, so we leave it up so that when the disaster happens, we can just turn it on and continue to add as we get additional information related to the event. So we're hoping that this is a helpful place for you. And if you have information that you want to share, this is not a public place. This is a place for nonprofits to get information and share what each other's doing so that we don't duplicate efforts. So that's going to, this is for you. And you can pull information off of it to give to your clients, customers, congregations, volunteers. But this is the nonprofit and everyone's site that is managing events. All right, any questions about any of that before we take a break? Okay, back to work. We're going to now talk about the shelters, the real official shelters, and we're going to start with a video clip. This is another FEMA prep talk that I hope that you get to watch in its entirety. The link will be in the chat. This will be Vance Taylor, and Vance is the chief of the Governor's Office of Access and Functional Needs. He has some great insights for us.
I just put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Access and functional needs is something I think maybe we're familiar with, but I just want to take a second and define it. So access and functional needs really refers to individuals who have physical, developmental, or intellectual disabilities, people with chronic illnesses or injuries, people who are transportation disadvantaged, low income, children, older adults, people who English is not their primary language, and women in late stages of pregnancy. So in a nation with 325 million people, the number of folks with access and functional needs makes up a very large percentage of our population. A month after I was sworn in, fires exploded in Lake County, which is in Northern California. So I'm activated, I'm deployed. And usually it's a beautiful area, but not on that day. On that day, there was scorched landscapes, downed trees. I remember the smoke was billowing in through the vents on the van, burning my lungs. And it was eerie because the whole way had been bright. But once we got into the burn areas, the ash hung in the air so thick, it literally darkened out the sun. And I pulled up to the shelter, and the struggle was real. Cars and trucks were parked in every form and fashion you can imagine, every way but the right way. Donations were dropped off in front of the curb cuts, making it impossible for me to access the shelter for the van, right on from the street to the shelter. So I had to get creative. I pulled the car up to the curb. That's how I got in. And once I entered, I realized that in the rush to set it up, to open the shelter to the community, the steps needed to ensure it could be accessed by everyone including people with access and functional needs, had been skipped, neglected, or overlooked. The bathrooms were incredibly challenging to get in and out of. The general population area was rough, the cots were too close together. The aisles were narrow, cluttered, and in some cases completely impassable. Now, throughout the shelter, I kept hearing everywhere I went, oh, check out the showers, check out the showers. And the shelter manager said, we've got built-in accessible showers. It's the crown jewel of our shelter. We get to the end, it shows me the pays de resistance and says, the showers are right through this doorway. Now, the doorway in question is a set of double doors. It's divided down the middle with an iron bar, making each individual passageway too narrow for my chair to fit. So I asked, well, is there another way to get in? He says, no, it's one way in, one way out. And I said, then I think we have a problem. And he says, just in complete shock, what do you mean you can't fit through? That's the only way to get there. And I could tell he hadn't really worked with people who have disabilities, because he says, well, what if I get behind you and I push really hard? So I called the State Operations Center. I said, hey, we need some portable accessible shower units down at the shelter. How many do we have immediate access to? And they said 5. Now, remember, I'm a month on the job. I know that California is like the 5th largest economy in the world. We have over 40 million people in the state. So I assumed they meant 500. And I was like, fantastic, because I was going to be the Oprah Winfrey of showers, right? I was like, you get a shower and you get a shower. We all get showers. And they're like, whoa, 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 we mean like single digits, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're all being used at a concert in Southern California, which was total junk because nobody showers at Burning Man. Well, by the time we identify the resources and we commandeer them and we get them procured and deployed and set up, 4 days had passed, which for government is breakneck speed. But for the people with access and functional needs who needed those showers, 4 days was an eternity. Now, after the ordeal, I was thanking some of my colleagues, and one in particular, Tim Britt, Great Emergency Manager. I said, Tim, thank you so much for your Herculean effort to help us get this done. And Tim says, hey, no problem, just doing my job. I love that he didn't see it as something extra or special. But I also didn't get the sense he truly appreciated the enormity of what we'd done. I said, Tim, I want you to visualize with me. Let me tell you what I saw that day. I went into that shelter and I saw people on the worst day of their lives. I saw people who were homeless for the first time, who had lost everything. It was hot and muggy, and we were all sweaty. And ash sticks to sweat, forms a grime that covers your body. And then I saw the look in their eyes, as I had to be the one to tell them that because we hadn't integrated or addressed their needs, that they had no choice but to sit in their filth and watch as their counterparts went in and out of showers to refresh themselves. So can you imagine for 1 minute what it must have been like for those individuals when the showers finally arrived? How miraculously cleansing it must have been to go in and turn on the water and have that cool, refreshing droplets cover your body and make you new again, to wash away the grime. People told me I felt like me again. I felt like I could rebuild. I had the hope it was going to be okay.
So that's our advocate in the state government. He's he's a great man and a great resource. Let me get past this. All right. Any comments about that video? Big takeaway for me is we probably need our own accessible shelter or showers.
This is Christine.
Go ahead, Christine.
Hello. Okay. So the two things that I take away from that video is this. One, there should have been a hell of a lot of work done way beforehand to set that up. And it's unfortunate that it happened that way. But it's really good that Vance was on that, on the trail of those portable showers. The other thing that, if I were in that particular situation, would really irritate me would be that nobody thought of sponge baths. Even though, obviously, having a true shower to go into and take care of things is far better. You can't beat having something. And a sponge bath is just as good. So a bucket and a washcloth and a towel will suffice in a pinch, but it's not the ultimate answer. I'm also not hearing anything being said about the need for toilets, the need for accessible sinks, or even water stations, or access to bottled water. Again, these are super critical things for everybody, not just those with access and functional needs. So we need to get out of this box that we put ourselves in. This is a human right that's being denied.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, it's we definitely have not put enough time and thought into addressing our whole population, and I'm hoping that this is the time that we make some changes. The list on your screen now is what resources a shelter has. This is a Red Cross shelter. You can see the ones with the asterisk, which are event information and status, telling people what they need to know, massage, medical, mental health support, security, social services for unaccompanied minors, translation, and Wi-Fi. Those aren't standard Red Cross issues. They can do medical, they can do mental health, but sometimes they need to ask for more. And so we need to identify all resources in the community so that if it's a long event or many shelters, that we can make sure that everyone is fully staffed, and the security in the shelter, security outside if there are people still in parking lots. And Liz has her hand raised.
Yes, please, please, please. I don't want to disagree with you, Marcia. Medical disaster health services is available and required in all Red Cross facilities. So there has to be some sort of communication with the health services as well as mental health. That is a given. That is not a nice thing to do. It is required. We also because of COVID, the eating area and all of those kinds of things, we have to take into account that now. One of the things that Red Cross does do, usually once a year or once every 2 years, is to do surveys of the buildings or places that have been already determined that they will be shelters. Because we could figure that we're going to be in shelter A in this disaster, but the fire's in shelter A area. So we have to have more than we have. And so we in fact look, and when we do these shelter assessments, we look for what other equipment do we need, like accessible shelters, extra shelters, what do we need to do? So that is something that is done all the time. And it's certainly, and the social services for unaccompanied minors, we have a rule in how to handle unaccompanied minors or other people who are having issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Liz. And yeah, I probably misspoke in that there are support services that the county and the city can assist with, but they are, except for massage, and I'll talk about that in a minute. These are all things that a Red Cross shelter does and does very well. And they are, because the COVID protocols are still in place, the shelters house fewer people now because they had to give them a larger social distance. And so the next slide, this is actually what Red Cross does for their shelters. Pre-disaster, they work with high schools and colleges and other specific organizations to look at potential shelter sites, as Liz said. And ideally, if your temporary evacuation point can turn into the shelter, so these high schools, colleges typically have pretty big parking lots, so that's one of the pluses of using them. They check their facilities. Every facility that they inspect for shelter, there's a long checklist that they go through, and it includes accessibility. And when they go to open it, they check that again. Shelters are set up within 2 hours if it's a single site. Within our county, we can do 2 sites at one time. And after that, we have to ask for assistance from other chapters in California or elsewhere. And so beyond those 2, there could be a delay. And because the 2 now they're smaller, there could be a delay because we have to open more because we can't put as many people in one. They do provide signage. They have signage. They have cots and blankets and comfort kits, which is all of the toiletries. They provide 3 meals a day, 24-hour staffing, disaster health services and mental health, and an emergency operations center care and shelter liaison. And she happens to be on the phone today, Ann Heresy. So did I want to say something else there? The signage. So Red Cross, they teach volunteers how to run shelters all the time. And they can teach anybody how to run a shelter. So it's important, if you think for jurisdictions, it's important to take the Red Cross training, because if they're not available immediately, you want them to be able to come in and transition to take over the shelter if you have to open it first. So you want it to be according to their plan, and they have a good plan. So that's enough about that. And then the local jurisdiction, this is how you would support a shelter if it's going on in your jurisdiction. You can provide shelter workers. Now, you wouldn't be running the shelter at that point, but you would be taking direction from a Red Cross lead. Public health may provide additional people. Arranging for animal support is a local jurisdiction responsibility. Transportation, if clients need to get somewhere, you might have to arrange transportation if they need to get to an appointment, or they need to get kids to school and they've been displaced from their area. Not everyone has the ability to get additional resources. Law enforcement or some kind of security. Yeah, we want site security as well, but law enforcement needs to be aware of the shelter and paying attention to it, because you have a bunch of people crowded together. 24/7 emergency medical services. So you could have, they do have medic on site, but you do need to have advanced care available. Public information officer, that would be coordinating directly with the Red Cross's PIO. And then planning for unsolicited donations, we'll talk about next time in our next meeting. Supporting the outside population. So not everyone is staying in a shelter, but people still need support. So they might be staying with family or friends, but they might still need gas cards or food, extra food or other things. And so even if they're not in the shelters, the jurisdiction's got to be tracking them and making sure that their needs are met, and that's not necessarily something that the Red Cross is doing. And then also, if people are staying outside, and that is a trend that people prefer to stay outside in the parking lot and kind of camp out, that you provide porta potties and hand washing stations and showers and security for them. And that all has to be accessible.
Marcia,
yes, this
Denise
is all
Gullen
overwhelming.
Gullen
ahead.
shared that on the chat that county fire, that the fire department has mass casualty tents that have portable showers that could be potentially could be converted to accessible showers as well. So that's something to think about.
Good resource. Thanks, Denise. All right, so we're going to go back to the whiteboard, and we'll ask the questions here first. So in local government, who's responsible for the shelter plan? Who staffs the shelter if the Red Cross is not available? So there are two situations when the jurisdiction might have to stand up the shelter without the Red Cross being there. One is that there are multiple shelters opening and they just don't have enough staff. So again, if you're opening the shelter, make sure you're following Red Cross guidelines, get their forms, get their signage, and follow their plan so that when they get additional resources, then they can take over from you. And then the second is that sometimes the sheltering goes on for an extended period of time, and that's because some shelter residents don't have clear next steps. They don't have a place to stay. The jurisdiction hasn't come up with a long-term housing solution for them yet. So at that point, if the Red Cross is not moving the people towards independence, they will turn the shelter back over to the jurisdiction to figure it out. And in this case, you might want to hire an organization to take over a shelter. This happened in San Jose for the Coyote Creek flood. After a couple of weeks, they had a number of people that I think they stayed in the shelter for more than a month, didn't they? Does anybody know?
Yeah, I think so.
And I can't remember if it was, I think it might have been Home First that they hired to take it over. And I don't know if they'd ever run a shelter before. I actually would be a good interview to see what that was like for a nonprofit that's never run a shelter before. We are going to put
Home First is a homeless shelter organization, so they did have some experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was good, and it was fortunate because I know that wasn't planned in advance, but because people know people, we're able to make those connections. It's more stressful that way, so you could do it that way, but it's better if we have these conversations ahead of time. Okay, so questions for the whiteboard. Who's responsible for the local government shelter plan? Actually, let me just put the whiteboard up and then I'll ask the questions and you can type. Let's see, new share. New share. Okay, not that way. Whoops. Sorry, back up. Stop share. New share. Whiteboard. Okay, so the questions. Who's responsible in local government for the shelter plan? And it varies, but within the incident command system structure, who is it? And then who staffs the shelter if the Red Cross is not available? So that's asking government do you have staff that are going to do that? Do you have plans to have your volunteers do that? Do you have plans for another organization to come in and do that for you? And then what is the role if you are using volunteers or staff from other organizations? What would you like them to do? Or those organizations on the call, what could you do? And then are there organizations that are willing to share those shelter responsibilities for a period of time? And does anyone have their own shelter supplies, like cots and accessible cots, which are wider and taller? Lots of questions. I see.
This is Christine.
Go ahead, Christine.
So can I pitch in?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, the Office of Emergency
type?
Services would be the first
There's
step.
a,
The second step, sorry, would be, would it be the FAST team? Because I know a heck of a lot of us at SALT have gotten our certificates. We are fast.
So that's a good point that I hadn't brought up yet. So the functional assessment service teams are individuals from organizations throughout the state, and we have many in Santa Clara County, that go into shelters upon request. Usually the Red Cross has them come in. They interview all of the clients to look for needs and to make sure that those needs are addressed. And that's a very simple explanation. Does anybody want to add on to it, or is that? But they're there to make sure that people's needs are getting met. Yeah, so the Office of Emergency Management they're responsible for writing the plans, but implementing the plans is not the Office of Emergency Management. Implementing the plans is, whoops, mute. Let's get that on mute. Okay. It's a department within the jurisdiction. Sometimes it's Parks and Rec. A lot of times it's Parks and Rec because they have some experience working with a large numbers of individuals. But yep, so I'm looking here. So the Care and Shelter branch. So in the Emergency Operations Center, it's the Care and Shelter branch, and then some part of the jurisdiction has created those plans. And so if they're not on this call, make sure they watch this video. Let's see, what else? Does anybody have cots? Disability cots available from the Red Cross. Okay. How many do we have? 5?
the county's
I'm
got a
kidding.
bunch of, when I was working for the county bought a bunch of disability cots as well. I don't know if Louise is still on the call and if that stuff is still.
Cindy. We still do have those disability cots.
Thanks.
They're at
Okay,
the warehouse.
great.
Thank you.
Great. And I know Sunnyvale has some as well. They have a pretty good shelter plan. And for those that don't feel like they have a good shelter plan, we can point you to some success stories in Santa Clara County, and you can work together and make each other better, because we're all in this together. So I see nonprofit organizations. Are there specific organizations on this call that think that they could support a shelter or a TEP? No commitments, I'm just asking. No, okay.
SVILC, Silicon Valley Independent Living
Independently.
Center.
Okay. Okay. Well, we can certainly talk about that later. All right. So you got your links in the chat. If you go to YouTube and search Congregate Care Shelters Red Cross, they have a ton of training videos there. So if you were trying to just get a better handle on, if let's say your church decided to do something for a neighborhood, there are easy little quick trainings that you can do to be better prepared.
One of the best things, this is Liz, one of the best things is to call us and have us come out and do a community disaster education program, or to in fact do a sheltering program for them.
Good. You're right, that is the best. Okay, so let's stop And go back to the PowerPoint. And did I, whoops. Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right. Just a couple more resources that you might want to know about, and I've mentioned them briefly. One, if your organization or your jurisdiction needs supplies or personnel flown into this area, CADRE, which is the Disaster Airlift Response Team, does regular exercises, and they practice carrying supplies. Now they're in small planes, but they can, if you have a key personnel person that's out of the area right now and you need them back here right now, they can fly them in. They can, let's mute the dog. There we go. You can fly them in, and I will send out, there's an information handout that CalDART has that explains how they work, and it's a great nonprofit. There's another nonprofit called We Hope that is in Santa Clara County and across the state. They have self-contained trailers that provide accessible showers, restrooms, and laundry. There is a cost to it, but I think that, I mean, it's last I talked to them, it was $1,000 a day. But if you wanted to avoid the situation that happened in the fires that Vance was talking about, that would be priceless. There's another nonprofit called the Ho Chi Foundation. They're in North San Jose. They have a program called Healing Hands, and they will come to a shelter. They'll come to an emergency operations center. You can send victims, people that need massage to their site, and they do chair massage. And they are we did it back in the day. Cupertino had an exercise, and they came out, and they stand behind their chair in this prayerful position, and they don't talk. They don't talk at all. So it just gives this very, very much of a sense of calm. And then the massage is always welcome. So highly recommend them in the future. CADRE can put you in touch with any of them. That's why we're here. So you don't have to have all of those phone numbers in your, oh gosh, I was thinking Rolodex. I don't know what that was all about. Okay. All right, pop-up shelters. Now, as I was saying, there are shelters that the Red Cross doesn't set up, but they might be working in conjunction with the Red Cross. Some of the more rural counties do this a lot with the Red Cross. The lower right-hand screenshot is a church. They've emptied out their meeting area, and they've put up inflatable beds there. The warning that I have for anybody that wants to do that is, if you don't get permission from the jurisdiction to do it, then they won't support it. So you will be completely on your own, and that's perfectly fine to be completely on your own as long as you've thought of everything that you need. And then if you need some kind of small support, that's possible. But what a city can't have is 25 locations around their city that have 15 people in each of them, as it's not the best use of their resources to try to truck water and food to each of those locations. But if you can handle it, Red Cross can show you how to do it and do it well. And neighborhoods can create their own pop-up sites. You can create your own shelter sites in your neighborhood with the resources that you have in your neighborhood. There's a recent example of a private and a faith-based partnership at the Caldor fire in Placerville. They had 300 campers and RVs descend on the Walmart parking lot there. And then a nonprofit named the Upper Room Dining worked together with Walmart and the Red Cross to support evacuees for 17 days. And I'm going to show you a few photos of that while Cindy Stewart reads an account of one of the volunteers from the upper room dining that supported that pop-up for 17 days.
My 17 days in Walmart parking lot. Sometimes when you aren't quite sure how to help, the best thing you can do is let your heart be your guide and find a way to do what you can, to do what you do best. 17 days ago, the upper room set up in a Walmart parking lot where many overflow evacuees had parked their cars and their RVs with nothing but their loved ones, their pets, and a few belongings to hang on to. Overwhelmed with fear and worry, with 0% containment of the raging fire, these families all wondered if they would have homes, a community, or even a community to return to. The least we could do is make sure that they were fed, had a place to gather, to share experiences, get questions answered, and find needed resources. Over the next 17 days, we had a chance to watch miracles unfold. This parking lot became a new community. People who had lost their homes reached out to help others. Strangers looked out for each other, and neighboring communities showed up in droves to help by donating anything they had that could help with evacuees: time, talent, money, resources, a place to stay, a place for their animals to stay. Anything and everything we could imagine was poured into this little Walmart community. As each day passes, the feelings of fear and confusion that had overwhelmed this parking lot slowly disappeared and were replaced with hope, laughter, friendship, and community. What a blessing to be in the middle of all of that.
Thank you, Cindy. And thank you, Tony. I see in the chat you mentioned that every shelter should have some books. And I think I'll add to that games or other activities for children, because they get bored really quickly in shelters. So I spoke with Charlie McDonald, who is the executive director of the Upper Room. I talked to him yesterday morning. He happens to be, he was my next door neighbor when I was 5 years old. And somehow I ran across him again. He said that they were very happy to partner with the Red Cross and Walmart, and said that they would do it again in a minute. He said that they learned a lot, and he'd be happy to come down to Santa Clara County and to talk to us about their experience. So stay tuned, because we'll definitely take him up on that and just listen to what all happened in 17 days in a parking lot. This is another, just a reminder to the public information officers that signage at the park, at these pop-up sites is really important. You can see on the right screenshot, it says, please go to safeandwell.org. That's for missing people. The Red Cross runs that site, and they can help connect people that have been, that are missing. That helps a lot when you evacuate and you were at different places at the time.
This is Cindy. I just want to put in a shameless plug for the fact that, when you evacuate, make sure you bring your pets with you. I was in a response to one of the large fires in Northern California a few years ago, and I worked with the animal evacuation folks, and the animal shelter there became overwhelmed immediately with phone calls from people who had evacuated themselves, gone to the shelter, and had not made arrangements for their pets, and now we're calling the animal shelter trying to get someone to go out and check on their pets, and it was really overwhelming. So make sure you've made accommodations for those pets as well.
Thank you, Cindy. That is really important.
By the way, Marcia,
Okay.
as I'm sure you know, Cindy is being quite humble. She did amazing work on that fire when it came to the animals, and I don't think very many people should forget that, but sorry to interrupt.
Yes, and Cindy, for those of you who don't know her, she worked at the County Office of Emergency Management for many years, has been a longtime colleague, retired and moved to Washington State, and we're still going to keep her around. So we'll definitely use her expertise as we're planning for the animals again, and helping other parts of the county plan for the animals. There's a lot of phone numbers on this sheet. I will send this all out to you so you don't have to copy it down. But Red Cross has, they're especially in Santa Clara County, very well trained, lots of experience, and lots of experience and really easy to work with. So thank you, Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley Red Cross. Okay, so now that the shelter's in place, CADRE is helping to bring nonprofits together to listen to what the needs are of the community and start to see how we can help. And that will be having a coordination call or a coordination meeting. We might go back to old-fashioned meetings again, where all of the organizations come together, much like we did for COVID, on our phone calls every week, where the jurisdiction impacted gives their report. The nonprofits that are already supporting the community are giving their report. And then we all get together and start to share resources and do whatever we can to provide the best for the community. All right, now we're going to launch a poll. Cindy's going to launch the poll. Just 4 quick questions to get some feedback on today. And while you're doing that, I can continue on. We can start talking. So if anybody has any last questions or comments before we close out the day, and I will give you the answers to the shelter tunes and talk about what's coming up.
Marcia, can you hear me?
I can. Yes, Ken.
I just wanted to let you know that Morgan Hill has over 600 cots and the accompanying things to make people comfortable on those cots. We can't handle that many in a sheltering situation, but that's a resource that people can use. We have a very active sheltering training program for both city staff and for volunteers, and a large cache to support sheltering operations, and about 5 setup caches around the city.
That's awesome. Thank you. I know Morgan Hill has a great group of volunteers and a fantastic leadership team, and they have done a lot. And they've had quite a few disasters too, which helps you practice, unfortunately. I'm thinking we need an inventory of cots that are around the county. So I'll add that to the list. Any other thoughts? No? Okay. Then coming up, we will have CADRE is hosting a continuity of operations planning, which is that's what you need to keep running if everything else fails. What's your critical functions? That's on September 21st. Disaster donations management. This is ahead of our exercise, so the exercise may be a little light on it because there'll be a whole other recorded presentation just on donations. So if that's what you are interested in, make sure that you tune in on October 5th. And then CBO, which is community-based organization and government coordination in times of emergency, is also coming up, and that's on October the 19th. So that's, again, it will tie into what we're talking about and how we're going to work together. I was just talking to Anna this morning. We may kind of work on this, make a little bit of a hybrid to address some of the things that we've already talked to on these first 2 exercises.
Marcia?
Yeah.
Sherry Burns said in the chat, there's several different things that people are asking for a list of like wheelchair accessible vehicles. And Sherry brought up privacy screens. And I just wanted to let you know that when I was working for the county, I purchased I don't know how much a buttload is, but a whole buttload of privacy screens, and the county's got those. They were custom built for us.
But we don't know where they are now, Cindy.
They're in that warehouse. Louie can probably help you find them.
Yeah, they should still be there. There's been some changes due to COVID, but you know, we can look into that.
Yeah, they're if the warehouse is still there, they're probably in the warehouse. They take up a big chunk of space there.
There are a bunch of those things that were given to various jurisdictions as a part of the pod training.
Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, we will start getting inventories. We'll decide who the best person is to do inventories for different things, and we'll get that going. I see noise canceling headphones. What a good idea. I think those should go in everybody's emergency kit too, because it gets really noisy in the shelter. And yes, we will share the PowerPoint and the recording. It'll be up. If all goes well, it'll be up by tomorrow. And it's on the CADRE website, cadresv.org/preparedness. And then you scroll down to the bottom, it says webinars, and you will find each of the webinars.